welcome back to Timeless Topics. In this episode, we discuss everything from microaggressions to the insidious and pervasive nature of racism and other systems of oppression to Gumbo. Yes, you heard me right, I said Gumbo. We wrap up the episode with an introductory book club list, so stay tuned for that. We'd love to hear what other titles you would recommend. We're grateful you're here with us. We start out the episode hot, talking about an experience one of us had with defining microaggressions. Let's jump right into the discussion.
How would you explain that if somebody asked you that question?
It's a heavy question, even though it shouldn't be, right? Now, sometimes it depends on the group that I'm speaking with, because sometimes if they are of mixed identity, however you want to look at it, somebody immediately is like, I got it, I can do it. Now, if I'm speaking to a fellow white person who often does not experience microaggressions because we're the dominant default culture, right? It's having to give examples and explanations of what it might be. So something like either changes in tone, body language, or overt things that are said or done that imply that someone is less than expected or less than acceptable social norms. So sometimes I'll say, things like, oh, you're really pretty for a Black girl. Or your hair is so nice, but is that your hair? Right? Like moments of like that, of like, it's a compliment. It's often sandwiched by a compliment. And the person giving it, I think, honestly, is delusionally means it positively, right? Like, because it's all they've ever seen. So they're like, but I said her hair was pretty. I said she was pretty. And you're like, but you qualified it. And would you say it the exact same way to someone who is more in alignment with whatever your identity is? Because it's easy for me to say that it happens a lot from white people because it's my experience, right? I walk around in a white body, but it also happens across any other identity, right? You could have somebody that is Hispanic that has a microaggression against somebody who is Black and vice versa, right? So it's trying to decentralize it so that people will receive it, but also not assuage responsibility where it needs to lie from a percentage wise, if that makes sense.
I think I was just shocked to know that someone didn't know that term or didn't understand that term, right? And then I didn't even go into the aspect of when I share that sometimes I can be in the hospital setting, standing with the rest of the neonatal team, and someone will turn to me and ask me, am I the housekeeper? And when hypothetically, when I share that story and someone then says back to me, well, they must not have meant it that way. They must have meant it because you didn't have on your white lab coat, right? That says you're a nurse practitioner. Can't even begin to then break down the now invalidation of my lived experience, right? So now not only has this microaggression been committed, but now you're telling me that that's not what it was and that I didn't feel what I felt. But
There's been some discussion that I've seen on social media around like Black Maternal Health Week, which it shouldn't have to only be had during this week and around this topic, but that's a whole other thing. Around how it's a death by a thousand cuts kind of mentality of realizing that all of these tiny, quote unquote, and who's the one making that judgment call as to what is tiny and what is not, right? But if we want to just euphemistically say, in quotation marks, tiny, interactions all accumulate, they all add up to cause the weathering component, like what we've talked about before, of just this, I can't even stand here with my 3 degrees and my brilliant brain and passion for this patient population and not immediately not be assumed that I am owed to stand here as a provider. Like, it's not even to shade housekeeping staff because we need everybody. Everybody is grateful. And I'm grateful for all hands in the hospital setting. But it's for you to automatically look and say, well, you obviously can't be this. so you must be that,
Yeah.
right? Which that's the hardwiring of that bias. That is what all the implicit bias trainings were trying to call out, but didn't 100% cross that threshold with,
Yeah.
to get people to really stop and think, well, why does it have to be one of those two options when we know there are 11 different roles in the hospital setting? So
Mhm.
how did we get to these two, right? Yeah. And the year of our Lord, 2026, right? We are still doing honestly foundational work, sub-foundational work on some of these concepts. And it is frustrating, and can feel disempowering, which is a theme we've talked about before, right? You're like, well, what's the point? No one's listening, you know? Which I know the three of us don't fully subscribe to it, but you still feel it every now and then. You feel those like flashes of it. And then you have to come to something like this and be like, okay, we got to refill cups and figure out how are we going to continue to push past these barriers.
What you made me think of is like when you first asked the question about microaggressions, um, it felt like it's almost like those silent strikes, because they're oftentimes like quick, um, and totally minimized, but in that split second, it devalues and dehumanizes the victim. That's kind of like how it feels. And I imagined like, I mean, I think it arises from its core, and this is not my subject matter expertise at all, but from racism, right? I mean, like, if you really want to have a racist society, then you need to make sure you've woven in all of these tactics throughout all of these different layers, like I'm thinking of an onion, of what life is like here in the United States. I'm sure other countries deal with it too, but I can only speak to my own lived experience. And it's so freaking insidious that I think it is that piece of it, and ignorance, that makes people say, oh, what the heck does that mean? That's an interesting word, and you kind of like think of it from whatever your lived experience is. So like from a white person, you know, I think of like, oh, what's a microaggression? Is that like, did somebody just step on your toe? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because I'm not going to talk about racism. I'm a good person, But so we've got all of these really creepy strategies that keep poking, that keep, like you said, death by a million cuts. That feels like it just encapsulates what that concept is. And I'm grateful to be with you women, because we won't stop speaking out. I mean, it does wear on you, and you can feel like so defeated, and like, why do I continue to bang my head up against the wall? Sometimes, you just feel like that. But I think, we are touching people, just because we don't see it. I think, people that listen to our conversations here, but also in our day to day, we're gradually cracking the armor that of hate, that just seems right now, especially, to be everywhere, absolutely everywhere. I don't know.
It's always interesting. I think I am still very much, even though some people who know me would probably disagree, I'm still pretty optimistic, right? I'm still a pretty positive person. And I do believe that the majority of times, most things aren't intentional, right? I don't think that most of us get up in the morning thinking, how am I going to be a total witch to the people around me today?
Yeah.
Right? I think it is sometimes with best intentions, like Jesse said. You know, the number of times that I've been asked by people to touch my hair, right? I totally like when you say, "You're so cute." that looks so nice. I would say the same, right? It's the aspect of, can I touch it? No, you may not. Like, what?
Yeah.
Right? I've had people ask that immediately after I got my braids. And first of all, my hand hurts. So, no, you cannot touch it. And two, there are many people who believe that the crown of your head, your hair, is like a spiritual connection. And you don't just let anybody touch your hair, right? Some woman at a store asked my husband, could she touch his locks, right? Because they're really long. And he was like, no, and I don't think my wife would appreciate it, right? And it's like, thank you, right? Because you just don't. And I do recognize that sometimes it is just out of not curiosity, but just an awareness, right? One of the first times that I went to Russia alone without the rest of my team around me, I was traveling with one of their physicians, and we were in the airport having dinner or whatever, waiting for our next flight. And she was like, I need to talk to you. I was like, okay. She's like, I need you to know that when you get there, people may look at you. People may stare at you. She's like, and I want you to know, because she had been in the US for like a month, so she had seen some of us. She was like, I want you to know it's not racism. It's because many of them have never seen a person of color in person,
Oh my.
right? And she was like, so I wanted to prepare you for that. And I don't know if I've ever told this story, but it was interesting when we were in the hospital, the women would hand me their baby and be like, picture? And I'm like, sure. Right. And so I'm taking all these pictures. And it was probably the fourth or fifth woman who asked me. And I was like, oh, they've not seen me before.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel bad,
Yeah.
right? And you have a gut feeling as to whether or not someone's interactions towards you are malicious, intentional, really designed to put you down versus you just don't know, do you? Right? Which is fine, right? I would much rather somebody ask me and us have a conversation, just like I would feel comfortable asking either of you anything, right? And it's like, I just don't know. I want to ask you because I want to be respectful. I want to be culturally sensitive. I don't want to be offensive. I respect you as a friend, right? As a human being. So please help educate me. And I don't think that we are all comfortable enough to have some of these conversations. So then it leads to the unintentional insulting things because we just don't talk. We don't ask people.
But don't you think, I mean, I agree with you that it's unintentional at a conscious level, but I think that there is some intention, and I might not be articulating this, so I'm just throwing it out into the atmosphere to bounce off of you guys. But is it an intentional design by the system? Like, my intention is not to say something hurtful to you. I love you, but I'm also speaking from a systematized, I don't know if that's the right word, white body who, says these things from programming. So it's not that, I'm consciously trying to zing you, but I've been programmed in a certain way and I'm unaware of that programming. And so when you made that comment about when you were holding little Russian babies, and it didn't feel bad, I mean, I think that's also a key piece of the distinction between non-aggression and
Mhm.
aggression, because
Mhm.
you can feel it. That wisdom that lies within you is, I mean, no joke. But when you have that activation of that, this ain't good, and then you get the gaslighting thing, right? Of I didn't mean to be offensive and stuff. I know your cortex, didn't, but your programming did. Is it possible that it is that layered and complex?
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Short answer.
Jesse's
Yeah.
like, oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have
mean,
a lot of thoughts.
I was gonna say, because I mean, I told them, they were like, you shouldn't, because again, this is me. I'm a creature of habit. I need coffee in the morning, and I'm a very picky eater. So I found McDonald's, and McDonald's was my friend because I could walk into McDonald's and I could point to the number one coffee, and the guy would nod, and then he would point to sugar, and I would say three, and he would nod, right? And we had, right? And then when it was dinner time, I could go in and point to the filet of fish sandwich, and it was fine, right? Like everything was fine, right? But they were like, you shouldn't be out here walking by yourself. It's not safe. And I was like, oh no, I feel good here. Like there are places in the US that I would not walk alone, not just as a Black woman, but as a woman. I would not. But I'm okay here. I feel good. My gut is telling me I'm fine. And they were like, no, you should not. And I was like, oh, okay. But so it is sometimes just gut feeling, right? But anyway, Jesse, you have thoughts.
I do. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to try to be the most succinct, but y'all know I'm not a succinct woman. So, and sometimes you just got to know yourself in the end. One, I think it's gracious to look at it as, let me not assume harm is there, even if harm actually isn't there, right? It's gracious to extend that. But oftentimes this ends up on a slippery slope of infantilization of white people. Well, bless their hearts, they just don't know better. Well, this is where representation plays a role here, and representation matters so much. Because when you think about, we don't know, even in medicine, right? Like we do not have a lot of textbook pictures that are in Black skin or melanated skin of any hue, right? So even thinking of like dermatology examples, it is most likely to be presented in someone who looks like me, super pale, where you are going to pick up every single change and anything that's wrong with my skin. But the way that same dermatological condition would show up on me versus you, Tracy, or someone of a different level of melanation is going to be very different. So it's being able to understand that without that representation, we as white people in the global sense get to still walk around and be like, well, I've never seen that. So then I can't be responsible for what I've never seen, when you absolutely can, right? Sometimes it means that we need to hold systems accountable to provide information, and then we need to hold ourselves and our communities, in the small sense, accountable for going and finding that information, right? This is where we have accountability too in this work, from an anti-racist lens, right? Because we can sit here and say that we know that burning crosses in front yards is a bad thing. No one is, well, I can't say that. I can't tell you that people wouldn't co-sign for it right now because the world is really wild. But a lot of people, right, would be like, that's not good. We're not going to do that, right? But it's the more systematic, insidious, internalized aspects of all the different systems of oppression, whether we're talking ableism, racism, homophobia, whatever it is, right? That's the work that has to be done internally to be able to pull these things into the light so that people of different identities do not have to continue to bear the emotional labor and weight and trauma of my ignorance as someone who is different than them.
Yeah.
And that's the heavy part for predominantly white people. That's the heavy part for us to understand because we've never had to do that work. People have always looked like me in books. They might not have had black hair, although I dye my hair because, whoever made me gave me the wrong color hair. But they've always looked enough like me for it not to feel like a shock, right? But then you have somebody who, even something as simple as using a mobility aid, or someone that has two parents or two parents of the same gender expression or something like that. Think of how much resistance has been felt to just the tiniest little introduction of inclusion and representation in things like children's books or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because it's really asking everybody to shake up the base dominant culture and reflect on, why does this feel so uncomfortable for me? Versus other people are like, we've been doing this forever. We've never known a life where we didn't feel uncomfortable in some spaces, of no fault to me. I'm going to pause there because I'm ranting, but.
No, you're not. You are so articulate. I love how you present this in such a clear, coherent way, and that these microaggressions, they transcend, I mean, all the different, ooh, tell me if I'm using this word correctly, intersections of human beings, Um, and I think, you know, I mean, I get, that it feels uncomfortable. I get that. Having this has been such a blessing to me, having these conversations with you guys, and with other folks, that have really helped me lean into or lean out of the white box. Do you know, like, because a lot of folks, you don't know you're living in a white box. I think sometimes, you know what I mean? I hope that doesn't sound bad, but like, you question it, you're like, no, isn't this weird? Like, never seen a black person, for how many years, and then you do, and then it's like, I don't even know how to act. I don't even know, like, and where does that come from? Where does that weird thing that happens inside you come from? Programming, early life experiences, modeling and shaping how you interpret the world. And that's not the world that we want, but it's the world that is, it seems, shoved down everybody's throats, like it or not. And so it does feel like a huge lift. And it crushes your heart to think about how long folks have been trying to lift and shift into a more like beautifully diverse world. As you were talking, I mean, this is like where my head goes in some of these deep conversations, but I always see that I kind of go metaphorical, but I was imagining like, like just a field of daisies or something, right? And how much, I mean, daisies are lovely flowers. They're lovely, but I love when I see a field with all different flowers, I mean, the wildflower fields, that you see and stuff like that. And do I think one is more beautiful than the other? No, I think they're all beautiful. And, I mean, and that's what we're limiting ourselves from. We're excluding ourselves from experiencing something that, yes, you might feel a little awkward. And we've been so programmed and programmed through facilitated disconnection, right? I mean, especially now with tech and social media and stuff like that, we don't even know people would rather text than have a phone call. I mean, we are creating more and more ways of distancing ourselves from our shared humanity. And I think that's a big player in why this issue has remained such a sustainable feature of our society. Do you know?
Yeah, when you brought up your field of wildflowers, it made me think of like historically from a US lens, right? We've always focused on immigration in the form of assimilation, the melting pot kind of mentality, which is the exact opposite of
Yeah.
what we should actually be doing from a human to human perspective, because
Yeah.
who wants one flavor of anything? Whether
Oh,
you're talking about
We,
ice cream or candy or one flower, like how boring is that? So it's being able to understand that we can be able to coexist, right? But it doesn't mean you have to have rote, assimilation to where you lose all of your culture and who you are, which is where white people always get mad when I say this, but like you end up with a sense of like white people typically do not have their own culture, right? We have ethnic lines and ethnic traces for some groups that have been able to connect to it, but there's no actual like white culture
yeah.
because everything, even white immigrants that came in, Irish immigrants,
Mhm.
all from Europeans, were
Yeah.
all asked to act exactly like everybody else if you wanted to be able to have whatever would success be defined for you. And often success was not how they would define it, but how somebody would let them define it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but people of different levels of melanation didn't have that choice. They couldn't choose to assimilate or not, which
Yeah.
is where you can't talk about systems of oppression without addressing racism and colorism and all of those things. It makes it foundational to all of those discussions because often that's the first intersection that somebody sees in someone's identity. but it means that we have to get really uncomfortable like with this work, and it is not fun at all. And it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel good. You feel like you're a terrible person and you're going to hurt people and that you have hurt people.
Yeah.
And you have to release, in a sense, the weight of it in a, you have to continue to pick up your feet, so you need to get over it a little bit, but not release it so much in a sense that you can just be flippant about it. Well, then it's fine. If everybody's got a bias, then I'm just going to continue to be this way because this lady said it was fine because that's what's true, right?
You know how there are this, what is it? There are 5 or 7 stages of death and dying. Those stages of death and dying. I think, and Jesse, you made me think of this. I think there are stages of like awareness. I won't say enlightenment. That first came up and it's like, no, it's not that. It's awareness, right? It's awareness of your own racism, and what that looks like, and trying to like figure out how to disentangle. And so I had said something in a call, and Jesse, you said something, you said it very gracefully. And you said, oh, many white women who are becoming aware of their inner racism, or I forget the language that you used, go through these stages or do this thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, so why I'm going to that is because I wondered, like, okay, if there is a path, like there are these death and stages of death and dying, or I think they call them something, grief. So are there stages of awareness or whatever you want to call it, so that, because I didn't know that until you said that, and that actually felt, I mean, I felt weird, just to be honest, but it also made me feel like, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this weird feeling that I'm having. And it sounds like if this is a stage, then I'm like, I'm going through the tunnel, right? And I'll get out to the light on the other side. And so maybe if there's a way of like telling people, like, come on board, all right, come on to the multicultural world of, the circle here. And these are the stages. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable. It's kind of like childbirth, you're all wicked excited because you're going to be anti-racist and you're going to just be the greatest expression of yourself. But then it's going to get really painful and you're going to push some stuff out. But then you're going to birth a brand new you, and you'll still be, learning on the job, because that's what mothering is all about. But at least you'll see that there's something better to move towards. I hope that does not sound too dorky, but
No, I think it sounds real. So that this sense of, oh man, I was sleeping on all of that, right? Like I didn't recognize any of that, right? And I think that from my perspective, same thing happens, right? Just in a different vein. Racism, yep, knew it was there, knew this happened, knew whatever. But now my sense of waking up is realizing the mechanisms that I put in place to try to keep everybody not uncomfortable, right? So I'm constantly going to say, well, maybe it wasn't intentional, right? And that's years of people saying to you, gaslighting, right? It wasn't intentional. You know it wasn't, right? I really do love you. It's okay, right? And so now, but I'm beginning to see that. I'm beginning to see the times that I will put myself down or make myself smaller so that I'm not too much
yeah,
for somebody, that I'm not too vocal, that I'm not making you feel uncomfortable. Because what I heard you say was that you're not looking at a field of yellow daisies, right? You never mentioned that you don't see color, but you commented that everything was different. And that's the whole premise of when people say, I don't see color. You do.
yes,
Because when you're looking at that field of wildflowers, you're recognizing that there are some yellow daisies and there are some red roses and there are some pink tulips and there are the purple, whatever the purple flowers are, right? But you're recognizing the various colors and you're embracing the
yes,
beauty of all of those colors. So when people say, I don't see color,
yeah,
you do. And you're supposed to. And
yeah,
you're supposed to embrace the beauty of each of those colors and the differences of all of those different flowers, i.e., different people. Same thing when you talked about the melting pot, right? What I heard you say was that instead of a melting pot of chicken broth, what we want is gumbo, right? We want everybody's flavor to stand out and for you to be able to pick out the beauty of those different spices, the beauty of the okra, right? And the sausage, right? And when we're thinking about our communities, that's what we should be embracing on, not trying to make it all the same, but recognizing that you, Mary, give a spice to the soup that I don't have. I don't have that same spice, right? I'm gonna give you maybe something a little more savory, right? Whereas Jesse is the full-blown pepper, right? Like we know that.
Yes.
And so that's the beauty of it. When you guys were talking, that's what was visualizing in my head, right? So yeah.
That is the awesomest metaphor. I love that.
Everybody from New Orleans is going to be like, wait a minute, what do you know about gumbo?
Exactly. And anybody who knows me knows I cannot cook a doggone thing.
But yeah, that is really the crux of it, right? Is like you have to see the diversity that exists in every setting, whether you're talking about studying diversity of algae growth in something in the ocean, which is people that is not me and will never be me, but somebody does that, right? Or you're talking about diversity in a group of people or diversity in levels of experience of a group of people. Like you have to embrace that individual perspective that comes with it and look at it not from a hierarchy and not from a who's right and who's wrong, but just what's your take? Because believe it or not, everybody's going to have a little something, right? Tracy usually is the one who brings this point up. It's usually not my speaking point of like you usually can find something that we can find a common ground on. Even if it's, hey, we both on earth today, right? That might be it. But you can find something. And if we can do that, then we can start to break down these systems that have taught us that anybody that isn't immediately like me is automatically the enemy, right?
Right.
Because for centuries, that's all we've done is if you don't look like me and mine, then you're not good, right? You are the opposite of good, which is bad. And I have to be good because I know me and mine. So then it's my job to stomp you out, right? Without realizing that everybody's coming at this actually from a similar angle, just with different perspectives,
Yeah.
right? Some resources that I cannot not plug, right, because of talking about this work. And I might mispronounce stuff because your girl did not learn phonics. So I usually cannot pronounce things correctly until someone says them to me. Maybe I have a learning disability. Who knows? But so, Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall is one of my absolute favorite books, and usually one of the first ones I recommend to people that are dipping into this work, especially people who want to identify as a feminist or are flirting with the idea of a feminist. And then for white women specifically, White Fragility is a good recommendation by Robin DiAngelo. It's not without fault, but it does a really good job at discussing things kind of heavy, but in an accessible way, I think. And then, of course, I feel like the landmark on this is Dr. Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. Is making sure that we're educating ourselves to these concepts from a place of inquisitiveness, from a place of vulnerability, so that we can grow that skill set and be able to promote inclusion and safety for other people. And realizing when is it for me? When do I have something more to learn? And when is it maybe something that this person has internalized along the way? Because we have internalized patriarchy, we have internalized racism, internalized ableism. All of those narratives are running in each of us from our own perspectives. And sometimes when you interact with somebody, you could be like, okay, I don't need to push a button here, but I also don't know that we need to continue this because this doesn't feel safe for you almost more than it doesn't feel safe for me.
You're making me also think of I've only started cracking it, but decolonizing therapy.
Yeah, that's another good one.
It's a big read. But I've also signed up for her newsletter, and now I'm blanking on her name. But I absolutely love them. She does a lot of stuff around indigenous wisdom and that sort of thing as well. And really, looking at, I mean, the problem with colonialization, and how that seems to be a cornerstone for how all of this wave of hate, assimilation, oppression kind of emanates from. So I really like her work. But
Dr. Jennifer Milan.
oh, thank you so much. Yeah. But it's not a quick read at all. I mean, it's really something that, you got to digest and think and reflect, or at least I have, and that may very well be just because of my own origins and stuff, but super valuable, super insightful.
It's a good one to recommend for clinicians, I find, because kind of in similar ways as to why the body keeps the score by Vessel van der Kolk is a good recommendation for intro trauma stuff
Yeah.
because it hooks them with the clinical side and the sciency part so that some of people are very quick to just explain away these phenomena as being weird individual quirks or opinions.
Yeah.
But when you have real good examples that are grounded, it helps dissuade some of that. And can engage certain brain styles, I find.
I feel a little bit book clubby right now, but I also have to make a pitch then for My Grandmother's Hands, which was a really nice introductory book for me. It felt very inviting. The author is a Black man, but I think he's a psychologist or a sociologist, and he talks about just the history of trauma and across Black individuals, white trauma, and tries to kind of help you see the historical, back to medieval times, just the origins of all that really bad stuff. But I love that he always touches stone with his grandmother's hands, and his grandmother was enslaved and was picking cotton someplace in the South, and how her hands were really almost not gnarled from arthritis, but just from the injury that happens to the skin repetitively from picking the cotton, but how he found so much comfort in the hands. And it was just a really, for somebody who's kind of dipping your toe into this work, I felt that it did a really nice job of not getting too spicy, as Jesse, like to say, coming out of the gate. And so you could really lean in and get curious about it as it unfolded. And then it was like, holy mackerel, the lights were going off all over the place. So it was really a really good read as well.
Yeah, again, not so sure on the pronunciation, but Resma Malcolm.
Yes, yeah.
So we found our way into a little equity-focused trauma-informed care book club recommendation for this, which I think is in some ways where we've been heading, right? Just kind of inviting people to maybe dip that toe in, right? And maybe if you've already got the toe, keep going, right? Until you can feel like you're ready to do some of the work, whatever that means individually for people. Because in order for these systems to shift, individuals have to shift too. There is no parentified structure that is just going to magic wand and bibbity boppity boo this away for us.
Yeah.
So, and individual communities have to hold themselves and their peers accountable, and not from a place of punishment or punitive, but just growth based, right? So that we can shift that. I spoke at a conference this week, and I always speak about trauma-informed care and bias together because to me you have to, they are so connected. And I had so many people come up and they're like, I've just never thought of it that way. But really that is what it is, and so it's just those introductory kind of, connections for people of, you don't have to sit here and think that you're some terrible person. We just have to go, okay, now I've been introduced to something and I know better. So now I can do better, in the words of Maya Angelou.
Timeless Topics is Jesse Barnes, Tracy Bell, and Mary Coughlin. It is produced by Jesse Barnes and music from Carlos Bell. The thoughts and opinions shared here are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official policy or position for any of the speakers' employers or any other affiliated individual or entity.